By the late 1930s and 40s, blacks were moving out of downtown San Diego and heading north to the seaside community of La Jolla. By then, a handful of black farmers and entrepreneurs had already been living in Coronado for decades, since the late 19th century. Meet a local family who settled in La Jolla, one that has wonderful memories of a new era in America and in San Diego. As a new era was evolving around the country, more blacks were moving to San Diego after the 1930s and 40s. They were moving to communities like La Jolla. Some were in the military, others were going to college, and many were part of the black social clubs around town, most of them in downtown San Diego.
So you had some that left the urban area downtown, Horton Plaza area, and moved out into La Jolla. And the saying was, who would ever want to live way out there? And now you have multi-million-dollar homes falling off the cliff, but you still have remnants and families who live in La Jolla of African descent.
Judith Meeks has a wonderful story and many fond childhood memories of her time in La Jolla.
It's the front part of the house there on Draper, and this is at Easter, as you can see the baskets.
Oh, you're all dressed up and handsome and everything.
Yes, we are.
Judith's father, Nathaniel Willingham, had a successful military career as a Navy Air Force pilot stationed at North Island Amphibious Base or Naval Air Base Coronado. Judith says her father brought the family to San Diego in the 1940s and settled in La Jolla in the 1950s.
Well, my mom and dad are both from Kansas. My mom from Kansas City, Kansas, and my dad from Topeka, Kansas. And what brought them out here was the military. My dad was in the Navy. He was Air Force, and he was a first class, I guess, officer.
Professor Chuck Ambers teaches black history at Mesa College. He also owns and operates the African Museum, Casa del Rey Moro, in Old Town, a must-see for visitors.
You had half a dozen families there, right at Pearl Street. Pearl is one of the main arteries in La Jolla. We talk about that. Some of them were coachmen for the private school, Bishop's private school. And with the turn of the century, the technology turned into automobiles, so they didn't need the use of the stables and all the stables that they had. And you had some of the prominent African-American coachmen to buy some of that property.
In fact, Judith's mom, Corinne Willingham, was a domestic worker when she arrived in San Diego. Besides working while her husband was at sea in the Navy, Corinne was attending San Diego State University to become a teacher. Corinne would get her degree and teach at many of San Diego's city schools.
They lived on a street called Draper, and to my memory, Draper had several different African-American families. There was this little hub of African-American families, and my mom mentioned that they owned their homes.
Judith's mother is 92 years old. Her father, Nathaniel, passed away some years ago. But during their younger years, the couple knew how to have fun with some of the top entertainers of the time. These wonderful family photos show the couple with some big-name stars in San Diego, what appears to be downtown.
And they were very socialite-type people. They got to rub elbows with people like Nat King Cole, Gregory Peck, Duke Ellington. She shared about some of her time were different places that they would frequent, Balboa Park.
Not too bad for a young couple. Besides the Willinghams, there were, of course, other families, some who had lived in Coronado as early as the 19th century.
So we talk about Coronado. You can talk about Coronado going back to the 1800s. And you had an African-American family, the Hutkins family. They owned a whole block of property in Coronado. And if you have any idea what a block of property in Coronado costs today, you're talking about maybe $1 billion or so. They had the third largest pig and hog farm in the San Diego County.
This photo from the San Diego History Center shows Amos and Cynthia Hutchins. They too came from Kansas. The Hutchins had a popular downtown barbershop. This photo shows the Hutchins Coronado home at the turn of the 19th century. As for Judith, her mother Corinne is showing the family what life was like during the 40s and 50s. These wonderful family photos show life in La Jolla and downtown San Diego. Corinne has also documented parts of her life so that her children and grandchildren can learn about the past. Finally, a visit to the historic Julian Hotel, the oldest continuously operating hotel in Southern California. The hotel was built more than 120 years ago. As for the town of Julian, it's always been one of my favorite places to visit, not to mention the delicious apple pies. Historians believe the original hotel owners may have started the apple pie tradition more than a century ago. If you want to go back in time, you want to visit the historic mining town of Julian. It's rustic but charming. The town's historic district includes the Julian Hotel and dozens of shops. It's a major visitor attraction. The hotel was built in 1887 by young black pioneers. It was named the Hotel Robinson after its owners, Albert and Margaret Robinson.
This shows Mr. Robinson standing on the front steps of the hotel sometime between, I'll say, 1900 and 1915, because he died in 1915, and he looks rather elderly here.
Steve Ballinger and his wife proudly own the 1880s nationally registered historic landmark. They purchased the Julian Hotel from the Jacobs family in 1976. The hotel was built after the first county gold rush in 1869, when black pioneer Nathaniel Harrison was the first to discover gold near Julian. Meantime, Steve shows me around the bed and breakfast inn, known as the Queen of the Back Country. For the first time ever, I'm getting a chance to enjoy the hotel's interior beauty.
This room we're going into right now is actually the original dining room to the hotel, and we still use it today for our dining purposes. We serve breakfast here and host our afternoon tea for our guests. And this is where I think Mrs. Robinson gained most of her fame.
It's believed it was the Robinsons' cooking which helped them start the restaurant, later the hotel. Historians say Margaret's good cooking and delicious apple pies made the couple and the hotel so successful. These photos show what the original two-story wooden building looked like. Additional wings were added in the 1940s to accommodate more visitors.
Well, this is the main lobby of the hotel, and we're standing in what was the original portion of that lobby. Behind me at this point, everything in that direction was added on in 1941 by the Jacobs family. And they had bought the hotel from the Robinsons about 1920-21.
They ran the hotel until 1915 when Albert died. And then Margaret kept on running the hotel until 1920. And then she sold to the Jacobs family. Margaret stayed on a little bit to help the Jacobs get the hang of running a hotel.
Longtime Julian resident and historian David Lewis has studied the Robinsons' lives for the past decade. He's found some incredible documents that give us a glimpse into Julian's past.
In the records for the church, it says a Negro woman, Maggie Robinson, joined today by letter and became one of the most devoted members of the church.
Meanwhile, Steve and I head to the second floor, and I'm eager to see what the bedrooms look like. Once we go upstairs, everything is simply more beautiful than I ever imagined. Steve and his wife have done a wonderful job of using furniture and decorative touches from the era. This is a lovely room. It makes me feel like I'm going back in time 110, 15 years.
Yes, it does. And we've tried to maintain furnishings that were appropriate to that time period, turn of the century.
Incredibly, some of the furniture is original to the hotel when the Robinsons first owned and operated the establishment in the late 19th century. The next time you want to enjoy a peaceful back-in-time experience, be sure to book a room at the beautifully maintained historic Julian Hotel, where at first everyone knew it as the Hotel Robinson, that Albert and Margaret successfully owned and operated for 28 years.